In the beginning, God created man and woman. And when he did this, man and woman were perfect. They had no flaws, no selfish motives, no irrational anger, and no toxic traits. When God made man and woman, though, he gave them free will, meaning they can do what they want. They can choose to listen to God and live with him, or they can choose to not listen to God. At first, everything was perfect. Man and woman both had strong and close relationships with God. They talked with God all the time. They took care of the land and animals that he gave to them. And life literally could not possibly be better. Then Satan, the devil, came along and started talking nonsense like he always does. He tempted man and woman to go against God and disobey him, and they fell for it. They disobeyed God. When you disobey God, that's considered sin. Anything that we do that doesn't align with God's principles is going against him, and that's a sin. So man and woman sinned. When they sinned, that put up barriers in their relationship with God. They now were not so close to him. God created us to be with him, to live with him and for him. But when we sin, we're not living for him. And the more we sin without asking for forgiveness, the more distance comes between us and God. As soon as the first man and woman sinned, the perfect world that was no more. No longer would a completely perfect human enter into this world. But we wouldn't have been any better. It doesn't matter if it was Adam, Eve, Sarah, Steve, or Nancy. We all have simple minds compared to God and would have chosen the same route, I'm sure. Once we sin, we can't remove what we have done in the past by doing good things. No one is good even if they do good deeds. That would be like saying a person who has scars from a third-degree burn on their face can get rid of the scars by wiping over the scars with a clean, wet rag. They can keep wiping, but the scars are going to stay there. You can't erase them. Sin leaves scars in our hearts and minds, and we can't wipe them away because the results of sin will affect us for the rest of our lives here on earth. As soon as sin entered into the world, so did death and decay. And when we sin, our punishment is separation from God forever. Think about this. God is the creator of life. He has always existed and always will exist. What is life? Life is something that literally, by definition, cannot die. Because if life died, then it wouldn't be life. Someone is either alive or they are dead. They are two different things, life and death. So if life cannot ever be death and God can never die, then God is life. So going back to how when we sin, our punishment is separation from God forever. If we sin, we have to be separated from life himself. So the only other direction to go would be toward death. And that's why our punishment is death. We can't erase what we've done. How devastating. That sounds like the end. Now think about this for a second. If you created someone and they were your masterpiece, you would love them more than any of the other creations, right? Any other creation that you created, you would love your masterpiece the most. Now, if your creation decided that they didn't want to be around you anymore, would you force them to stay with you? If you did force them, would they love you to the same extent that you love them? No, because they're being forced. So naturally, you should let them go in hopes that one day they come running back home to you because they miss you and they love you. It's the same thing for God with his masterpiece, us. We sinned, separating us from him. But because he loves us, he allowed us to keep our free will so that if we chose to love him in return, it would be genuine love, and he made a way for us to return to him if we choose to do so. In order for our scars to be wiped away as if they were never there and go back to life himself, we would need to defeat death. None of us can defeat death, though. The only thing that can defeat death would be life. So that's exactly what happened. God has 3 parts to him, just like we do, because he made us in his image: body, soul, spirit. God's body was Jesus, the Son of God, who was also God. He came to this world in the most humble form possible, a baby, a human baby. He grew up in this world so that he can be relatable to us, and the entire time he was on earth, he never did anything wrong. Never. Ever. He was absolutely perfect, blameless. Eventually, a lot of people ended up hating him, but none of them had a logical reason for hating him. Some of them were simply jealous and blind to the fact that he was God. And because of their selfishness, they killed him. They killed God. But not because they overthrew him. They weren't more powerful than God himself. He allowed this to happen to him. Why? Because that was his plan. He wanted that to happen. Because how do you defeat someone? You must first confront them, right? Well, that's what Jesus did. He confronted death. After you've confronted them, you knock them on the ground and walk away. So that's what Jesus did. He confronted death and raised himself back to life. How? He's God. He's literally the creator of life. Coming back to life is how he knocked Satan, the king over death himself, down. When Jesus died and rose again, that is what made a way for all of us to be able to live forever in the presence of God instead of dying and going to hell and living with Satan forever. Jesus was tortured and died for you and for me. All we have to do is say thank you. Believe that he really did do this for us and ask him if we can start this relationship with him and live eternally with him. That's it. It's a gift. It doesn't cost you a penny because God loves you. Third part of God that I mentioned is his spirit. When we begin this relationship with God, he puts his very spirit, God's spirit, inside of us to communicate with us, to guide us, and to convict us. This shapes us and refines us to be people whose hearts and minds align more with God and his principles rather than looking like the rest of the world. It's honestly the most beautiful process. Very difficult to go through, but still the most beautiful. Your eternity with God can start now and lasts forever, for the rest of your life here on earth, and continues on in heaven for all of eternity.